Welcome to the deep dive. First job, full time. You made it to the big leagues. We're diving into a financial guide for you for right now. Oh, and congrats on the new gig.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
And this deep dive is more than just like, your typical skip the latte savings tips.
Right. It's bigger than that.
Yeah, this is about figuring out what you want your life to look like and then setting yourself up to, well, get it, starting right now.
Love that. Okay, so this guy we're looking at jumps right into budgeting,
Okay.
but it's not just about tracking every penny, right?
Well, and that's what I think is so interesting about this guide. It's not that at all. It actually like reframes the whole idea of budgeting.
Mm-hmm.
Like imagine being able to say yes to a last-minute weekend trip with friends because your budget makes room for, guilt-free fun money.
Yeah.
It's about freedom.
That's so much more motivating than just like cutting back all the time.
Totally.
Okay, this guide also really stresses emergency funds. But isn't that kind of tough when you're just starting out? What if someone's barely making rent and, paying bills and all that?
I mean, I guess tough. And that's why I think this guide is great because it breaks it down into like these mini goals. Even if you can only swing like $50 a month, that's still a win.
Mm-hmm.
The key is to do it consistently, like set up an automatic transfer. That way, if like your car suddenly needs a major repair or whatever, you're not totally freaking out.
So it's all about building that safety net, like one brick at a time.
Exactly.
Okay, I love that. Now, something else that's great about this guide is it doesn't just focus on saving, but also earning, especially negotiating your very first salary.
Mhm.
Now, they don't teach us that in school.
Right.
So what are some actual tips beyond, the general advice of know your worth?
Well, yeah, knowing your worth is step one, but this guide goes even deeper. Use those websites, Glassdoor or salary.com. But don't just look at the average salary. Look at the whole range for your specific job in your specific city because it can vary so much.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
And then practice. Like
Right.
actually say your salary ask out loud. It can feel awkward at first, but it makes a difference, I promise.
I wish I'd known that before my first job.
Yeah, it's a game changer.
Okay. The guide also talks about understanding your entire compensation package. So what's in that besides just like the actual salary number?
Right, well, this is where things get interesting
Right.
because we're talking health insurance, 401ks, any potential bonuses.
Oh, right.
Some companies even offer student loan repayment now. You need to consider the whole picture, not just how much you're taking home each month.
It's like comparing, apples to oranges.
Yeah.
A slightly lower salary with amazing benefits could actually be the better deal overall.
You got it.
Okay, so then of course comes the fun part, taxes.
Everybody's favorite.
So how does this guide help someone who's literally never had to deal with them before?
Well, I think the important thing here, if we're thinking bigger picture, is that doing your taxes right from the beginning can prevent huge headaches later on.
Yeah, for sure.
And this guide walks you through filling out that W-4 form. It's the thing that tells your employer how much to withhold from your paycheck for taxes. And if you get it wrong, let's just say you might end up owing a lot of money when you file.
Oh, no.
Not fun.
No one wants that surprise. Okay, this guide also dives into understanding your paycheck because honestly, it can feel like it's written in some secret code.
Oh, absolutely.
Hmm.
This guide, it helps you decipher all those deductions, like what's the difference between gross and net pay.
Uh-huh.
And honestly, it can even help you make sure you're actually being paid what you agreed to.
Right, right.
Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to your hard-earned cash.
Yeah, being able to advocate for yourself, making sure everything's legit.
Exactly.
Okay, speaking of things you don't want to mess around with insurance, I remember being so overwhelmed by all the options when I started my first job.
Oh, yeah. It's a lot.
Like, where do you even begin to figure all that out?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it can feel like a jungle out there. So this guide, it starts with the basics, explains those employer-provided plans, premiums, deductibles, copays, all those terms that can make your head spin.
Yeah.
But here's the cool part. It also talks about HSAs and FSAs. These are accounts that can actually help you save on your healthcare costs.
Oh, interesting.
If your employer offers them, definitely look into those.
So it's worth like really digging into those plans, especially for someone who has like recurring medical expenses.
Definitely.
Okay, now this might seem like a lifetime away, but this guide is already stressing retirement planning. Why so early?
Well, it all comes down to compound interest. Like imagine you invest $100 today. With decent returns, in 30 years, that could easily be $400.
Wow.
But if you wait 10 years to start, you miss out on a lot of that growth. The sooner you start, the longer your money has to, work its magic.
It's like planting a tree, right? The sooner you plant it, the bigger it'll grow.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So even small contributions now can make a huge difference later.
that makes a lot of sense. So if your employer offers a 401k match, that's basically free money, right? They're adding to your retirement savings based on what you put in.
That's right.
But are there any downsides to 401ks that people should be aware of?
Good question. Yeah.
Like, what if someone isn't sure if a 401k is right for them?
Well, that's why it's so important to do your research. This guide also mentions Roth IRAs as another great option, especially when you're younger and just starting out. It all really depends on your specific situation and what your long-term financial goals are.
Gotcha. So explore all the options, figure out what makes sense for you.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's talk about the elephant in the room for a lot of new grads, student loans. What advice does this guide give for managing that debt?
This is where it's so important to really understand all your repayment options. This guide goes beyond the, standard plan and explains income-driven repayment, which means your monthly payments are based on how much you earn. And then there's refinancing, which could potentially lower your interest rate and save you money overall, but it does have some downsides, so read the fine print.
Okay, so it's about finding the right strategy for you and being aware of all the details. But student loans aren't the only debt to worry about, right? Credit cards can be super tempting when you finally have a steady paycheck.
Oh, tell me about it. It's
And
so easy to fall into that buy now, pay later trap. This guide is really good about emphasizing responsible credit card use. If you pay your balance in full every month, you avoid those crazy interest charges and you build a good credit history.
which is so important. Good credit affects everything, renting an apartment, getting a car loan.
Right, it affects so much.
Speaking of apartments, this guide even covers things like housing costs and transportation, which can really eat into your budget.
Oh yeah, it covers all the bases.
Yeah.
And it encourages you to think beyond just your monthly rent check. You got to factor in moving expenses, security deposits, utilities,
Oh, right.
even renter's insurance. People forget about that all the time.
Easy to overlook those things. And transportation, well, that's a whole other thing. It really depends on where you live and where you work, right?
Absolutely. Driving your own car, public transit, biking.
Yeah.
Could even be a mix of everything. This guide just wants you to be realistic about those costs up front and include them in your budget from day one.
So have a clear picture of your total expenses, not just the big ones.
Right.
We've covered a lot, from budgeting to taxes, retirement, housing, transportation. But this guide goes even deeper into building financial literacy. What does that even mean?
It's not just knowing what a 401k is, but understanding how it actually works.
Yeah.
This guide breaks down investing, all those terms,
Yeah.
stocks, bonds, mutual funds. It helps you figure out your risk tolerance. Are you someone who plays it safe, or are you more, high risk, high reward?
So it's about educating yourself and making smart decisions about your money.
Exactly.
And that probably goes hand in hand with being aware of scams.
Unfortunately, yes.
There are so many out there.
Especially scams that target young professionals who are just starting to figure out how to manage their own money. This guide is great about highlighting some red flags to look out for. Things like investment opportunities that sound way too good to be true. If someone's pressuring you to make a decision really fast, or if they're asking you for personal information that just feels off, trust your instincts.
It's about being skeptical, protecting yourself.
Right.
This guide's full of practical tips, but it also talks about something that I think is really important: setting both short-term and long-term financial goals.
Right.
What's the difference, and why is it important to have both?
Okay, think of it like this. Short-term goals. Those are your stepping stones, things you can achieve in the near future. Maybe paying off a credit card balance, saving for a vacation, or finally building that emergency fund we were talking about earlier. And then long-term goals, those are your big dreams. Buying a house, retiring early, starting your own business. Those are the goals that shape your whole financial journey.
Okay, I love that. Having those goals in mind can actually make all the planning and saving feel way more meaningful. It's not just about saving money, it's saving for something that you're actually excited about.
Totally.
But before we get too carried away dreaming about our goals, let's talk about something that's not always so fun: the legal and documentation stuff that this guide covers.
Oh yeah, the not so glamorous part.
Yeah, it can feel a little intimidating.
Yeah.
Why is it important to think about these things early on?
Well, it's all about being prepared, just in case something unexpected happens. This guide talks about setting up a power of attorney, both for your finances and for medical decisions. That means choosing someone you trust to make those decisions for you if you can't do it yourself.
It makes sense. You just never know.
Right. Exactly.
What other legal or documentation stuff does this guide cover?
It also talks about designating beneficiaries for your accounts,
Mm.
like your 401k, life insurance, even just your bank accounts. This makes sure your money goes where you want it to if, well, if something were to happen to you.
So it's not just about managing your money today, but also planning for the future and making sure everything is handled the way you want it to be.
Exactly. It's about having peace of mind, you
Yeah.
know, just knowing that you've got things covered. This guide, it goes even further though. It dives into investing in your career, which can have a huge impact on like your earning potential,
Yeah.
your long-term financial well-being, everything.
It's not just about getting the job, but growing in it, you know, and learning new things. So how do you invest in your career? What does that even look like?
Well, the guide suggests being proactive about seeking out professional development opportunities. It could be, going to industry conferences, taking those online courses everyone's talking about, even going for like specific certifications.
That's interesting. Yeah, there really is a ton of learning available these
Oh,
days.
for sure. Like so much of it is right there at our fingertips.
So true. What if, though, what if someone's working full time and they don't have a ton of free time or extra money for professional development?
That's a great point. The guide gets that. It really encourages people to like find creative ways to learn even while they're working their current job. It could be volunteering for a new project or shadowing someone in a different department or even just like setting aside even 30 minutes a day to read those industry publications and stay up to date.
Be resourceful. Find those little pockets of time to invest in yourself. This guide also talks about networking, which I think can be kind of scary for some people,
Yeah.
especially like introverts.
Networking can feel intimidating, for sure. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be all about like schmoozing at those big events. It can just be about building real relationships with people who work in your field, Like connect with someone on LinkedIn or grab coffee with a former classmate or join an online group. It can be that simple.
And you never know, like you were saying, those conversations can lead to something bigger, right?
Oh, absolutely. I've seen it happen so many times. A casual chat turns into a mentor connection or even a job offer down the line.
And it's not just about getting stuff, it's about sharing what you know too, right? It's like two-way street.
Exactly. It's about giving and receiving. And in the end, it's about building that community, those connections, finding people who can support you and guide you, even mentors.
Speaking of mentors, the guide mentions how valuable that can be for your career. But like, where do you even find a mentor, especially when you're just starting out and, you don't have a huge network yet?
Well, one thing this guide suggests is identifying someone you admire, in your industry. Maybe they're a few steps ahead of you in their career, and then just reach out. Connect with them on LinkedIn, or if they're speaking at an event, go to it and introduce yourself. You can even send them an email, just saying you respect their work and asking for like a quick informational interview.
What if they say no, though? I feel like that could be really discouraging, putting yourself out there like that and getting rejected.
Of course, it's okay to feel bummed, but don't let it stop you. Like this guide reminds us that finding a mentor, it's a process. It doesn't usually happen overnight. It might take time to connect with the right person. Just be persistent, you know?
Yeah.
Keep putting yourself out there.
Yeah, gotta be proactive. Don't give up easily. And, no, mentorship doesn't have to be some super formal thing. Sometimes it's just having someone you can run ideas by, someone you trust who can give you advice and support.
Oh, totally. And mentors can pop up in the most unexpected places. It could be a professor you had in college or a coworker or even just a friend or family member who works in a similar field. You never know.
Keep your eyes open. Okay, so we've talked about budgeting, saving, insurance, even investing.
Hmm.
This guide covers it all. It's seriously like a roadmap for your whole financial life.
It really is. It lays everything out so clearly.
But before we move on, I want to circle back to a topic we touched on earlier, that transition to financial independence. This guide really acknowledges that it can be kind of, well, complicated.
Oh, yeah. It's a huge step, not just financially, but emotionally, too.
Yeah.
It's about moving from relying on your parents to being totally responsible for yourself.
Like officially becoming an adult, at least when it comes to money. What advice does the guide give for, making this transition smoothly?
Communication is key and setting those boundaries. Like if your parents are still helping you out financially, it's super important to talk about expectations.
Hmm.
How much will they help and for how long? What are they expecting in return?
It's about having those conversations up front. Avoid any surprises or resentment later on. And it's about respecting each other's points of view, too. Like, your parents' idea of financial independence might be totally different from yours.
Yeah.
It's about finding that middle ground,
Yeah.
respecting your parents' wishes, but also being able to, like, do your own thing. And ultimately, it's about, having that confidence to take charge of your financial future. That's really what this guide's all about.
Before we wrap up this whole deep dive, there's one more piece I want to touch on, something that's not like directly about money, but is super important, career
Oh,
development.
yeah, for sure. This guide is great at connecting, like, your career and your finances,
Yeah,
because they really are linked. It encourages you to think about your career as an ongoing investment. You got to keep putting in the effort to really make it work. So it's not just about getting a job, but like always learning new things, expanding your skill set. What are some ways to actually do that, though, to invest in your career? I mean,
well, the guide talks about being proactive about finding professional development opportunities.
hmm
So, like going to conferences, taking those online courses, or even,
yeah.
getting a certification in something.
Yeah,
It's pretty amazing how much you can learn these days, and a lot of it's right there online.
it's true. There's so much out there. But what if someone's working full time? It's tough to find the time and sometimes the money for those things.
Right. And this guide gets that. It actually suggests finding creative ways to learn and grow even while you're still in your current job.
hmm
So maybe it's volunteering for a new project at work or shadowing someone in another department just to see what they do, or even setting aside, 30 minutes a day to read some industry publications and just kind of stay up to date on things.
Be resourceful. Find those little pockets of time to, invest in yourself. This guide also talks about networking, which, I don't know, I feel like some people just hate the word networking. It can feel so
Oh,
forced.
totally. It can feel really awkward, but it doesn't have to be like all about going to those stuffy events and trying to collect business cards.
Mhm.
It can really just be about making connections with people who work in your field, Like reach out to someone on LinkedIn or grab coffee with an old classmate or even just join an online industry group. It can be that simple.
And like we were saying before, you never know what can come out of those conversations.
Exactly. It can turn into a mentor relationship, even a job offer down the road.
It's true. It's happened to me. And it's not just about getting stuff from people either. It's about sharing your own experience and knowledge. It goes both ways.
Totally. It's about giving and receiving, yeah. And at the end of the day, networking is about building those relationships, finding that support system, finding those people who can help you out, maybe even become mentors.
Oh, speaking of mentors, this guide talks about how valuable it can be to have a mentor in your career. But how do you even find one? Especially like when you're just starting out and don't really know that many people in your field yet?
Right. Well, this guide suggests, like, first think about who you admire in your industry, someone who's, maybe a few steps ahead of you in their career. And then reach out. You could connect with them on LinkedIn, or if you know they're speaking at an event, go to it and introduce yourself.
hmm
Or, maybe just send a nice email saying how much you respect their work and asking for like a quick chat,
Mm.
an informational interview.
But what if they just like ignore you or say no? It can be scary to put yourself out there like that.
Oh, of course. It's totally normal to feel nervous. And yeah, it would be disappointing if they said no. But don't let that stop you.
Hmm.
Like, this guide reminds us that finding a mentor is a process. It rarely happens right away. You got to be patient, keep trying. Eventually, you'll connect with the right person.
So be persistent. Don't give up. And I think it's important to remember that mentorship doesn't have to be, this big formal thing. Sometimes it's just having someone you can talk to, someone you trust who can offer some advice.
Yeah, totally. And honestly, mentors can come from anywhere. It might be a professor you had, or a coworker, or even a friend or family member who works in a similar field.
Keep your eyes open for those opportunities. Well, wow, I feel like we covered so much in this deep dive. From budgeting and taxes to retirement planning, housing, transportation, even career development. It's amazing how much this guide covers.
It really does cover all the bases. It's like the ultimate guide for navigating your finances, especially when you're starting your first job.
It is. Before we go, I just want to leave our listeners with one final thought. This guide is great at laying out all those practical tips, but now it's time to think about your goals. What do you want your life to look like? What are you working towards?
I love that because ultimately it's not just about the money, it's about making choices that help you create the life you want.
Exactly. Congrats again on landing that first job. Now go out there and, make it happen.
Best of luck.